married Zach because it was familiar. The thing that I discovered quite early on, however, is that familiarity can quickly become dull. That is, of course, what eventually ended up happening. Soon, the comfort was boring and restricting. It was like putting the same puzzle together over and over again. Ultimately, the pieces that fit together will get old and worn out. That's what happened to us. When he died, I felt nothing. At first, I thought I'd be glad that he was gone. When that didn't happen, I thought I might be sad. But all I felt was an emptiness inside of me. I didn't cry at the funeral, and right after it was over, I went home, packed all of his things up in boxes, and drove it down to a donation center. The only thing I kept was his wedding band. It was a simple gold band with my name engraved on the inside. I couldn't figure out where to put it. At first, I set it down on my nightstand, but it stood out like a sore thumb. It was like a beacon, drawing my eyes to it as soon as I walked into the room. I decided to put it in a drawer. When that didn't work, I went out to the backyard, to an area that Zach had wanted to turn into a garden. The ground was soft, and it didn't take long for me to dig a hole in it. I lost track of time while I was digging. It was therapeutic for me in a way. I shoveled dirt and watched it pour off the shovel and off to the side, over and over again, until the hole was big enough to bury the body of a small animal. I took the ring out of my pocket and angled it so I could see my name on the inside of the band. Laurel. I stared at it until it looked wrong and lost all meaning. Finally, I tossed it into the hole and covered it back up with the dirt. Then, I went back inside the house to clean up. As I sat at the kitchen table staring out the backyard window, I started to realize that the house didn't feel any different without Zach. In fact, if anything, it felt free. It was as if getting rid of his belongings had gotten rid of all the memories of him, and I was okay with that. I went to bed alone for the first time in years and slept through the whole night. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of coffee. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Confused, I got up and slowly made my way downstairs, peeking around the corner to look into the kitchen. My heart sank when I saw Zach standing behind the kitchen counter, making breakfast.
"Good morning, love,"
he said in a cheerful tone. I ignored him and ran to the back door, throwing it open and running outside. The hole was uncovered, and I ran to it, already knowing what I would see. There was nothing in there. The ring was gone.
"Laurel, are you all right?"
I slowly turned around and walked back to the door where Zach was standing. I could hear my heartbeat drumming in my ears as I looked down at his left hand and saw that the ring was sitting loosely on his pinky. "How are you here?" I asked.
"I came back for you because I love you, Laurel."
His words were like a heavy weight on my chest as fear and guilt fought for dominance inside of me. My hands were sweaty, and I realized that I was shaking, and I couldn't stop. My face felt numb, and my hearing muffled as I stumbled toward the kitchen table and dragged one of the chairs out, falling into it. This can't be happening. He isn't real. This isn't real. I held my head in my hands as my elbows dug into my thighs. Zach dropped a hand on one of my shoulders. His touch was cold and foreign.
Are you all right? Should I call someone?"
I shot out of the chair. "No!" I snapped. He flinched, but didn't take his hand off my shoulder. I brushed it off and stood up as I began to regain more control of my breathing. "I'm fine." I rubbed my hands on my pajama bottoms as I stood up and retreated to my room, locking the door behind me. He knocked a few times, and each time I swore he was going to break the door down with the force of his fist against the wood. I ignored it, but finally went back downstairs when I got hungry. He wasn't in the kitchen anymore, but as I was looking through the fridge, I heard his footsteps come up behind me.
Laurel?
I flinched. My name sounded like profanity in his mouth. I stood up and shut the refrigerator door, suddenly losing my appetite. The house felt crowded with him here, like the walls and ceiling were closing in on me. I couldn't get enough air in my lungs. "You shouldn't be here," I said, turning around to face him. His eyes, which used to be golden with life, but were now dull and menacing, stared back at me.
But I came back to you because I love you.
He inched closer to me, and I backed up. He smelled like wet dirt and rain, and it made it harder for me to breathe. I reached behind me and grabbed a kitchen knife off of the counter. There was a flash of bright red anger, and the next thing I knew, the knife was dripping blood, and Zach had fallen to the ground with a hand cupping the side of his neck that was spitting blood. I watched him die, and once I was sure that he was dead, I pulled the ring off of his finger and took it with me into the basement. I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox near the stairs and hit the ring until it shattered into a million different pieces. Then, I swept up the remains and poured them into the upstairs toilet. I flushed and watched the water swirl around the bowl until everything was gone. I didn't know what to do with the body, so I simply dragged it outside, made a larger hole, and tossed him in there. Once I covered it back up, I went back and cleaned up the trail of blood that led from the kitchen to the makeshift grave. Some of the blood was stubborn, refusing to come out of the back porch, but I scrubbed until my hands were raw. When I went back inside, I double, then triple checked that all the doors were locked. I couldn't keep myself from periodically peeking out of the window to the patch of dirt where Zach now lay. Part of me kept expecting to see him digging his way out of the earth once again, but that didn't happen. That night, I fell asleep at the kitchen table, and in the morning, I woke up on the couch. I was disoriented as I sat up and looked down at the knitted blanket that had somehow wound up around me. As I heard banging going on in the kitchen, the confusion morphed to dread. He was back. I got up, just to make sure, but I already knew that I was right. I stared at him and looked down to find that the ring was yet again on his finger, even though I had gotten rid of it. This time, however, something was different. There was a scar on his neck from the day before.
Good morning, love.
His tone was less cheerful this morning, although I didn't blame him. "Why are you here?" I sighed. I'd only just woken up, and yet I already felt my shoulders slump with exhaustion.
I'm here because I love you.
This time, I ate his breakfast. He didn't eat, and his skin was developing a gray-blue color. His eyes were sunken in. He looked as tired as I felt. I stared at the wedding band as I ate, not able to peel my eyes away from it. I hit my breaking point in the evening and smothered him with a pillow. He didn't even fight me. It was as if he wanted me to kill him. Again, I went through the process of dragging his body to the backyard and burying him in the same spot. I slipped the band off of his finger and walked over to the edge of the backyard fence, throwing it as far as I could. I didn't hear it land, and I walked back inside, not even bothering to cover the hole up this time. On the third morning, when he showed up again, I realized that I couldn't escape this. No matter how many times I killed him, no matter what I did with the ring, Zach was always going to come back. He was always going to be here. It didn't take long before even this felt familiar. I soon became accustomed to his gray-blue skin, sunken eyes, and cold touch. I found comfort in the dread and the guilt and the pain. This was my life now, and whether it was heaven or hell, I couldn't tell. Sometimes as I lay with my back against his chest at night, I wonder how long it's going to take before the pieces of this puzzle wear out. I ask him, time and time again, why he came back. His answer is always the same.
It's because I love you, Laurel.
I know he knows that I don't feel the same, that I probably never loved him, and the only reason I married him was for the feeling of familiarity that I didn't want to let go of. He never brings it up, though. I don't know how long I can live like this, but I know I can't escape it. I've tried. Maybe it's the ring that keeps him here. Maybe it's my guilt. Or perhaps it's revenge for killing him the first time. Or maybe, just maybe, he's the one who's doomed, tied to the love of his life, his killer, who will never love him back.